I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Shorty had them apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur. The whole crowd was looking at her. She hit the floor. Next thing you know, Shorty got low, 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 low. What's up, guys? Happy Sunday. Welcome to Sabby's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I know I haven't been live on a Sunday in a while. Actually, the past 2 weekends have been pretty busy, but I'm back. So what's up? What's up? Let's go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. We do have a great show planned for you, so I hope you like it. Already seeing comments about some of the stories. What's going on? I know myself says Bowman is like, fuck it. The Democrats and MSM are on borrowed time. Got to put my marker down for 2028 as an independent. Yeah, wait till we get to the Jamal Bowman story. That one's really good. Shout out to Rania for getting that interview with Jamal Bowman, because he really did spill some tea on some things. So if you're wondering what happened during his term, you're going to find out. Shout out to Dr. Darnell. Keep up the excellent work, Sabby. Let's continue to build a third party, Green Party movement. The Democratic Party will be replaced by the Green Party. It's just a matter of time. Interesting, Darnell. Shout out to Max, says congrats on 150K subs. Thank you, Max. Thank you so much. Greetings, AJ says Europe. Shout out to Timbo. Joe Biden needs to listen to Greg Palast and challenge why 2.7 million in swing states were not counted. I think they're still counting. If I remember correctly, like what I saw recently, they're still counting ballots. So shout out to Layers, said Sabby got 150K subs. Yes, thank you. Greetings, Jenna. Scalloped potatoes can be a meal if you eat enough scalloped potatoes. This is true. When I was in undergrad, we used to do this thing called sides for dinner. I don't know if everybody ever heard of this, but we would have a side, but it would be our meal, right? So like, I guess mac and cheese doesn't count because that can technically be a meal. But sometimes like we would have like rice, but it was rice with other things mixed in it, and that would just be the meal. Yeah. These things can happen. Greetings, Kawan says Malcolm X birthday. I love Trump 2024. The criminality in the black neighborhoods have always done the wrong to make what? I don't love Trump. But more power to you. Greetings, yo, Sabby. You should discuss the global north, such as the United States and Republic of Ireland, putting Americans through transnational repression. I'll have to look into that. Shout out to Tim. I've come to realize that America is full of sociopaths who only care about themselves. A whole genocide and people give a F about Tyson, blah, 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 blah. Stop the genocide. Wake up, America. You know what was interesting about that Tyson fight? It really wasn't worth the time to watch it. And I think, you know, a lot of people on social media were pretty angry about this. And they said, I can't believe I spent all this time trying to reconnect on Netflix just to watch this for like, you know, there was no knockout punches. And I think people were waiting to see that, whether that was going to be from Tyson or whether that was going to be from Jake Paul, but that didn't happen. And it was just kind of meh. Actually, the best fight that night was between the two women. There were two women that were boxing right before the Tyson fight, and that was actually an exciting fight. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend going onto Netflix and clicking onto that fight, but watch the two women. They happened before that, and I thought that was pretty entertaining, to be honest with you. Shout out to my comrade JB, says, good evening, Sabs. One day we're going to greet each other like Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy in Trading Places. Looking good, Billy Ray. Feeling good, Lewis. It's going to be a fun time. I hear you, JB. By the way, if you guys have never seen the movie Trading Places, that is one of the movies that I say you have to see. That is one of the Eddie Murphy movies that you have to see. It is a must. So if you haven't seen it, put that on your list. Greetings, Hannah says, love Sundays with Sab. Thank you. Shout out to Rose, who sends hello. Greetings, JB, again. Thanks for the super chat. Sabby, congrats on 150K subscribers. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been one hell of a year, huh? One hell of a year. Greetings, Deshaun. I think Deshaun sends a laugh emoji. I think that's a bashful laugh. Shout out to Lauren, says, free Palestine. Greeting, Jasmine. I can't wait for the Malcolm X story. Some things, girls, some things. Okay, some things are happening. Greetings, and shout out to Eric T, who says JB with the news. Greetings, Lee Boy says Black Fist. Leroy, sorry, not Lee Boy. Shout out to Randy, says, hello, all my Sabby comrades. Greetings, C. Shata says, hey, Sabs. Shout out to Jay, says, anyone else freely to this before Sabs hop on? Freely? Freestyle? Freestyle. Maybe it's freestyle. Greetings, Anthony sends a smile. And shout out to Kalimba, says, Sunday with Sabby. Yeah. And the Apple Bottom Jeans song has been stuck in my head for the past couple of days. It's one of the songs that's on my workout playlist. And yeah, and plus I was at the gym earlier today too, and I was listening to that, and I was like, Apple Bottom Jeans, the boots with the fur. I don't even know if people wear Apple Bottom Jeans anymore, but at one point they were really popular. But I still see people wearing the boots with the fur. I still see it. What's up, Robert said, I refuse to watch that fight. Mike gave Roy Jones problems at that age, but folds to this clown. Yeah, I mean, and you know, Mike Tyson, I mean, he's up there in age now. Some people wonder, they were like, was it fixed? Was the fight fixed or whatever? I don't know. All I know is I don't think it was worth the time. Like I really expected to see at least one kapow, like knockout, you know? And for people, yeah, LaShondra said ladies boxing is so violent. Yes, I know, right? And you guys watch the female fight and tell me if you think that it was fair, that the ruling was fair. Because I did see the other woman, she was headbutting, and I don't think that was cool. Yes, Bianca. Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy classic. That's right. That's a good one. Trading Places. Hey. Yeah, fam. So we have a lot to discuss. Also, really quick to Netflix. Hold up. You guys got to do something with the bandwidth, because the biggest problem that people had that night was, even if you were able to if you clicked onto it and you were able to get into the live, it would kick you out because there were so many people trying to watch it at one time. Netflix didn't have the bandwidth for all of those people that were trying to watch it. So it was like, I got frustrated. Like we kept going back in, getting kicked out, So I don't think they were ready for that. Brian said, great fight, but she got robbed. Yeah, I mean, like when you go back and watch the replay, the other girl, she was headbutting not once, like multiple times, which that should have been called, right? But it is what it is. Okay. What are we going to discuss, ladies and gentlemen? Really quickly, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. Keeping the lights on around me. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate. There's also Sabinators. Don't forget about the Sabsters. And there are also Sabbies. Yeah, look at those Sabbies doing the damn thing. bang. Yeah. Oh, I had to fix that gap there. I still have to do that. And of course, members, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much, fam. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. But what are we going to discuss tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. Here we go. Yeah. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Anna Kasparian and, well, TYT as a whole shocks viewers. And man, I was reading the comments, and I usually don't. Like I told you guys, usually I don't read comments, but I was like, let me look at the comments of this one. I was reading the comments of that video, and it was interesting how many people in the audience were saying, you guys are actually conservatives and da-da-da. I was like, oh boy, here it comes. We're going to discuss that. We're also going to discuss Jamal Bowman exposes Dem insiders. Yes, fam. Jamal Bowman apparently is appearing on left independent media. And now that he is no longer a member of Congress, he had some things to say. So buckle up, get your tea, get your popcorn, because that was a juicy conversation. We're also going to discuss Dana Bash confronted. Oh, yes, fam. And she had the nerve to respond on Twitter after this video was shared. And her response was just weak. We are going to break that down. Dana Bash, she has the look on her face like, We're also going to discuss Mehdi Hassan lies on voters. We're going to get down to that video, that interview that Mehdi Hassan had with Joy Reid. And there's a couple of things that I want to debunk because I want people to understand. Again, yes, Mehdi Hassan is no longer at MSNBC, but Mehdi Hassan is sure enough to maintain the status quo so that he can still be invited onto MSNBC. So he's still like a Dem op. You know, Rafat Alarik, he was correct about Mehdi Hassan when he said not to trust him. So remember that. Rafat Alarir, he was correct about Mehdi Hassan. He warned everybody. And last but not least, this is a huge story. That is Malcolm X there, the Malcolm X lawsuit. So Malcolm X is obviously no longer with us. However, that does not mean that his family cannot still seek some type of justice. So get ready for all of that, folks. I'm excited, and I hope you are too. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. We are on our way to 200,000 folks. So again, thank you to all of you for supporting me. I'm still shocked that I reached 150K subs, but that means I'm doing something right over here. All right. All right. So tonight's theme is It's a Long Story. You can see the theme on the chalkboard behind me, and it relates to a lot of these stories tonight. In fact, most of the stories tonight. It's a long story, but is it really? We're going to start with our first news story tonight, and that is about Malcolm X. You know, Malcolm X's family never received justice for his death. Over a year ago, I covered a story letting you know that his family members were trying to get justice for him and that it was possible that they would file a lawsuit. Well, that was over a year ago. And ladies and gentlemen, that day has finally come. And what does this have to do with the FBI? Let's go ahead and get into this, ladies and gentlemen. We start off with this clip here from the BBC.
Relatives of the black civil rights leader Malcolm X are suing U.S. law enforcement agencies for complicity in his assassination 6 decades ago. They claim the CIA, the FBI, and the New York Police Department were aware of a plot to assassinate him, but did nothing to stop it. The family is seeking $100 million in damages. 3 men were convicted over his death, but 2 were exonerated more than 50 years later when the case was re-examined. Raymond Hamlin is a lawyer acting for the family.
So you ask yourself this last question. Why would the government prosecute 2 individuals knowing those individuals had no involvement in the assassination? What was it that our government, that the city was trying to protect?
Our correspondent Rowan Bridge is following developments from Washington. He gave me this update.
Malcolm X was a charismatic but controversial figure within the civil rights movement of the 1960s in the United States. He was the chief spokesman for the Nation of Islam, to start off with, a sort of black nationalist movement. And he became famous for saying that black people should use whatever means necessary to claim back their civil rights, including violence. But he split from the Nation of Islam. He went on a pilgrimage to Mecca and came back with a very different sort of viewpoint. He moderated his earlier views, and that had created a lot of tension with the Nation of Islam. And he
pause here. So this is the part that I want to chime in at this part right here, because this is important to remember. A lot of times, I remember when I was in high school and when we were learning about civil rights movement, when it came to Malcolm X, I remember the way that he was described in my textbook is that not necessarily a controversial figure, but that he was a problem, right? That he was a menace. He was a scary person, that he was against all white people, and basically the same way that they talked about the Black Panthers. And I had to do some of my own research later on to learn just who Malcolm X was and what he really wanted and what his life was like. That happened when I moved to Boston. For those who are not aware, Malcolm X's old house is still in Boston, and I know that they're fighting to keep that in place as a historical monument, or as a historical building. They're trying to fight to keep that in place, for those who are not aware. So I started to do some of my own research, and I realized what I was taught about Malcolm X in school was incorrect. Just as I realized what I was taught about the Black Panthers in school was also incorrect. There were a number of things that were left out. You know, Malcolm X, he decided to change his path later on. This is the part that he's discussing right now, that later on he decided, you know what, maybe this isn't the right way to go. You know, maybe we should be trying to bring everybody together. And there were differences between Malcolm X and MLK, where MLK was fighting for integration. He was like, I want everybody up under one, room. We can all like live together peacefully together. And in the beginning, Malcolm X didn't see that would work. Malcolm X said, I don't know about that. We need to fight for Black people and that type of thing. But later on, like I said, he changed his mind about that. And he was like, you know what? I don't think this is the right way to go. Maybe telling people that we have to distance ourselves, or we cannot work with other people, different races, maybe that's not the right path to go down. Next thing you knew, not too long after that, Malcolm X was killed. I constantly, like every now and then, I will think about, what would this country be like today if Malcolm X lived? What would this country be like today if MLK lived? And I wonder if Black people would have started to believe that the Democratic Party was the answer, that neoliberalism was the answer. Because what people have to understand is that when these leaders were alive, it was more common for Black people to follow their message, whether they followed Malcolm or whether they followed MLK. They were all different civil rights activists. But once those leaders were killed, and you can add Fred Hampton to this as well, Black people were kind of ushered into the Democratic Party. They were ushered into neoliberalism. And I really do feel like this is where the fight stopped. This is where a lot of the revolutionary movement stopped. So I always wonder, what would it be like today? Would we have more as a community if Malcolm X was still alive, or if MLK was still alive?
Received death threats to his life, and he feared for his own safety when he returned to the United States. And then he was giving a speech at a ballroom in New York when he was assassinated. He was shot dead in front of several hundred people. And the allegation now is that there was complicity by the authorities in Malcolm X's death. This all comes off the back of a letter which was allegedly written by a New York police officer before he died in 2020, where he said he had infiltrated Malcolm X's organization and got his security team to commit offences so that they could be arrested by the New York police before Malcolm X gave that speech. And
Yes. So this part is incredibly important, the infiltration. And it wasn't just Malcolm X. MLK had infiltration in his movement and the civil rights movement as well. Fred Hampton, you guys know the Black Panthers were also heavily infiltrated by the FBI. So it is these groups were getting somewhere when they had to have the FBI agents infiltrate those groups to try to stop what they were trying to accomplish.
And then the allegation is also that there were undercover officers in the ballroom who did nothing to protect Malcolm X and allowed that shooting to go ahead. And there has always been controversy over whether the authorities were complicit in his death or not. And I think this court case, really, one of the things they're hoping to do is prize out that information to get a full accounting of what happened, and also to get reparations for the family of Malcolm X.
Yeah, so
Everybody heard that? They're trying to get reparations for the family of Malcolm X.
Take us through the timeline now of what happens next.
Well, I mean, American court cases can take some time. I mean, this is a civil suit that they are bringing against the FBI, the CIA, and the New York Police Department. So that case will now have to make its way through the courts. At the moment, though, the authorities involved are all making no comment on the case. So at the moment, we have the sort of headline that the case has been filed, this unlawful death suit has been filed, and now we'll wait for that to sort of grind its way through the American legal system, really.
Okay, so let's get to the article because we have a little bit more detail in this article here. Now, it is his daughters. Some of his daughters have decided to go forward with this lawsuit. And I want you to hear a couple of things here from AP. It says the daughters of Malcolm X sue the CIA, the FBI, and the NYPD over the civil rights leader's assassination. So we're talking about these government agencies, the CIA, the FBI, and of course, obviously not a government agency, but the NYPD. So this is why I continue to say these agencies, the alphabet letter groups, the CIA and the FBI, when people say, and I will say this, when people say, oh my God, Trump and them are talking about getting rid of the FBI or reducing the FBI or the CIA. And I'm like, and I am not fond of those agencies. I'm not fond of them for a number of reasons, but one of them being that they have continued. They have been a big reason why those revolutionary leaders did not go forward in this country. Whether it was the Black Panthers, whether it was MLK and the civil rights movement, whether it was Malcolm X, the FBI and the CIA infiltrated those movements and they stopped progress. Now, this is not to say that we did not get some type of improvement through the civil rights movement. We did. But people have to know what else they were asking for. They wanted other things. MLK was talking about unionization before he was killed. MLK was talking about reparations before he was killed. It wasn't just about let's integrate and everybody live together. There were a number of demands that they had, and those agencies destroyed it. So I don't have any love for the FBI. I don't have any love for the CIA. You can miss me with all of that because those agencies have continued to attack Black radicals and Black revolutionaries. Look at what just happened with the Uhuru 3 with Amali Yeshitela. These agencies are not your friend. So it goes on to say here, going to dive into this a little bit. I'm actually going to make this just a little bit bigger here. So Ben Crump, we're all familiar with him. Attorney Ben Crump stood with family members as he described the lawsuit, saying he hoped federal and city officials would read it and learn all the dastardly deeds that were done by their predecessors and try to right these historic wrongs. The NYPD and the CIA did not immediately respond. Of course they didn't. Of course not. For decades, more questions than answers have arisen over who is to blame for the death of Malcolm X, who was 39 years old when he was slain February 21st, 1965. We have to go on to say here, it says he was born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska. Malcolm X later changed his name to El Haj Malik El Shabazz. 3 men were convicted of crimes in the death, but 2 of them were exonerated in 2021 after investigators took a fresh look at the case and concluded that some of the evidence was shaky and authorities held back information. And then we want to get to this part right here about the lawsuit. The lawsuit alleges that there was a corrupt, unlawful, and unconstitutional relationship between the law enforcement and ruthless killers that went unchecked for many years and was actively concealed, condoned, protected, and facilitated by government agents. According to the lawsuit, the NYPD, coordinating with federal law enforcement agencies, arrested the activist security detail days before the assassination and intentionally removed the officers from inside the ballroom where Malcolm X was killed. So, the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD purposefully removed Malcolm X's security detail. So there was no one there to protect him. These agencies are a menace. Malcolm X wasn't the menace. Fred Hampton wasn't the menace. MLK wasn't the menace, although they talk about MLK in a more favorable light because he said everyone come together in peace. These agencies were the true menace. They took out these leaders. It goes on to say the lawsuit was not brought sooner because the defendants withheld information from the family. This includes the identities of undercover informants, agents, and provocateurs, and what they knew about the planning that preceded the attack. Malcolm X's wife, Betty Shabazz, the plaintiffs, and their entire family have suffered the pain of the unknown for decades, the lawsuit states. They did not know who murdered Malcolm X, why he was murdered, the level of the NYPD, the FBI, and the CIA orchestration, the identity of the governmental agents who conspired to ensure his demise or who fraudulently covered up their role. The damage caused to the Shabazz family is unimaginable, immense, and irreparable. The family announced its intention to sue the law enforcement agencies earlier last year. So they are now moving forward. They have a lawyer. They have Ben Crump as their attorney. This is the same attorney that was involved in the George Floyd case and other civil rights cases, as well as police brutality cases. The daughters are moving forward with the lawsuit as they should. You have to ask yourself this question. It's not as though no one knew. People knew. People in those agencies knew, and they covered it up. And they blamed two men who were innocent and said that they were the ones that killed Malcolm X. Anything to protect those agencies. And that family, for all these years, just sat back and wondered, why? Who? When I say that these agencies are a menace to society, believe me, they are a menace to society. I sincerely hope that Malcolm X's family gets the justice that they deserve. Ben Crump is a pretty notable attorney. He doesn't always win, but hopefully they can win here. And then we need to have a serious discussion about these agencies just going away, because this is another thing. Sir Michael Singleton. Now, Sir Michael Singleton, by the way, is conservative. Even Sir Michael Singleton is not fond of the FBI. And I want you to hear what he had to say here. And he said this on CNN. I'm actually surprised they allowed him to say this on CNN, but listen to this.
Let's go over the history of the FBI, shall we? The FBI investigated Dr. King, frivolous nonsense. The FBI even investigated the late singer Aretha Franklin. The FBI targeted and investigated members of BLM. The FBI, in my opinion, does not have a great record in history of necessarily serving all of the American people. So as far as I'm concerned, if you want to send someone in to sort of shake that place up, be a disruptor, I am actually not necessarily against that. I agree with Van in terms of wanting someone to lead the agency well, but the FBI does not have the greatest record in the world of representing and protecting all Americans, maybe some Americans. You know what, Van is right. We do care about law.
And they in particular, they tend to go after Black radicals, Black revolutionaries, Black socialists. And Van Jones, who's supposed to be the liberal on the panel, why does the conservative have to sit there and explain to you what the FBI has done to Black people? He mentioned Aretha Franklin. Like, this is ridiculous. Why? Because Van Jones protects the status quo. So you have the conservative here, Shermichael, and he's explaining to Van Jones, no, this is why the FBI is problematic.
Are in order, and it should be led by responsible people. But the quote unquote responsible people haven't necessarily addressed some of the issues that I raised. I mean, investigating and illegally targeting and spying on activists.
Talking about that, Shermichael.
No,
that's not the conversation we're even having.
But the point that I'm making.
It's like we're talking about something else, and you're literally going in a different direction.
No. It's very relevant. The relevancy here is if you're going to say that the FBI is led or should be led by these great responsible people, my critique is these very great and responsible people have had a whole lot of faults that a whole lot of people would say, I don't think they're great. I don't think they're very responsible. That's the critique that I'm providing here.
So you see what's happening, guys? You see what's happening? And of course, Van Jones is like, well, no, you know, anyone who wants you to believe that the FBI is good, anyone who wants you to believe that the CIA is good, these people are not to be trusted. They're either buying into the propaganda, they know people who have been a part of the FBI, or either they've been a part of those agencies, or more than likely, I think it is they're buying into the propaganda. But these people, no, you have to ask yourself why, particularly Black Americans. Black Americans know what the FBI has done to other Black Americans, how they target Black socialists, how they targeted MLK, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, the Black Panthers. We know this because that's our history. So for Van Jones to sit there and pretend like, well, the FBI is, no, I don't understand it. Get out of here. Get out of here. When I tell you it's a long story with Malcolm X, it's a long story. And I highly recommend, if you have not had the chance to do so, to read Malcolm X's autobiography. I read his autobiography when I was in high school. I highly recommend that you read it so you know the full true story. This is not to say that Malcolm X was perfect. He was not. But he's also not the menace that they tried to paint him out to be. Learn about these people. Learn about these leaders. Learn about the revolutionary leaders. Learn about the Black socialists. Learn about the Black radicals. Learn it on your own, even if just so to educate yourself. And I'm telling you this because it's a long story. It's not short. It's not just Malcolm X just hated white people and so he was a bad person. No, it's more nuanced than that. And until you seek this information out for yourself, until you choose to educate yourself, you will continue to buy into the propaganda that the status quo wants you to believe. I don't care for the FBI. I don't care for the CIA. All these agencies, in my opinion, can just go away. Just go. And I'll be fine. All these people saying, oh no, oh my God, Donald Trump wants to get rid of especially any of the Black politicians, any of the Black correspondents here, like Van Jones, any of them saying that, oh no, that's a problem. They're a part of the game. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you. Thank you, Gold Bear Animations. Thank you for the super chat. I'd like to come on the podcast, please. Come on the podcast. Email me. Send me an email. My email address is in the description of my videos. Thank you, Ace Play. Sabby, the fight was fixed. Mike would no money or make no money if he bowed out. Jake in the first round, or knocked out Jake in the first round. Okay. Also, he made money according to how long the fight took. Interesting, huh? Will says, Sabby, if Bowman is doing independent media rounds, will you try to get him on? I think everything that needed to be said is said in the Rania interview. I mean, like, she asked pretty good questions, and you'll see that later on throughout the show tonight. But I think enough has been said. Also, I would say to this, you know, it's great that Jamal Bowman is doing that now, but where was that when he was in Congress? Why did all of the squad members ignore left independent media the entire time that they were in Congress? But now that you're not there, now you got time to speak. Oh, honey, wait till we get to that story. President, one Malcolm X killers was friends with Cory Booker in Newark. Do tell, President Jafar. Do tell. Shout out to Kit from Hardlands Media, says, hit that like button. What's up, Kit? Thank you. Name it. We all love you at the Rathbone stream. Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. Make sure you follow Rathbone as well. I heard they were trying to get him on YouTube. Crazy stuff, guys. He talks a lot about Gaza, so follow him. Shout out to Tristan. The outgoing Biden regime has authorized long-range attacks by Ukraine/Zelensky regime on Russia with U.S. system. What a wonderful gift to humanity. Yeah, I see Biden's trying to start World War III before he exits. This country's crazy, man. Shout out to Neiman for the super sticker. Thank you. And thank you, I know myself. Support Gates for AG. That boy is good. I don't think that's going to happen. Because like I said, those positions still have to vote on it. Congress does. And it sounds like that is, if there's one that's probably not going to happen, it sounds like it will be that one, because they're trying to bring forth the ethics case about Matt Gaetz. So interesting stuff, folks. Interesting stuff. I told you we live in a cartoon. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell ya? Hey, hey, hey. Hotspot, are you serious? Biden trying to start World War III? Yes, yes, because Vladimir Putin already said that if the Biden administration allows for long-range missiles to go from Ukraine into Russia, he said he would consider that to be an attack from the United States. I've been trying to warn people, man. Been trying to warn people, but no, you know, people told me foreign policy wasn't important. Okay. Are we going to go to the next story? Let's do it. All right. This one's a doozy. Okay. Yeah, I like this one. So journalist, commentator Dana Bash from CNN was confronted. Recently, she was confronted by Code Pink activists. And one thing I want to say to the woman who confronted her is that, number one, she wasn't yelling. She wasn't being disrespectful. You're going to see that in the video. She was very calm. And I want you to remember that when you see Dana Bash's response. Because first of all, Dana Bash, you have spread multiple lies about Israel and Gaza. And the fact that this woman was as calm with you as she was, I want to go ahead and give her a round of applause for being as calm, because I don't think I could have done, I don't know. Like, I don't think I could have done it. But Code Pink here, journalist Code Pink, we're going to start calling her commentator, but journalist Dana Bash, disbelief when you're confronted with facts about Israel's policies. Let's get into this confrontation here. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Grace Holzman. I'm a member of this community, and I want to tell you that I'm really upset at what I perceive to be the conflation of anti-Semitism. This is not true, and that.
Okay, so first of all, what she said was that she's a member of the community, and she's upset about the conflation of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism.
Anti-Semitism. This is not true, and that is very anti-Semitic and very dangerous to our Jewish community and our Jewish values. When you do that, I just don't know if you understand that you are being a mouthpiece for the genocide in Gaza.
let me pause here. Okay, so this is where I think she's being a little too nice, right? She told Dana Bash that she doesn't think she understands that she's being a mouthpiece to the genocide in Gaza. Dana Bash knows exactly what she's doing. She knows she's being a mouthpiece to the genocide in Gaza. So I think, for the woman that's confronting her when she says, I don't think that you understand. No, I think that you're giving Dana Bash too much credit. She knows exactly what she's doing. She does understand. The script was written months ago. She knows what she's doing. So don't give her that much credit.
That is wrong. Genocide is the most anti-Semitic thing out there. This woman is 90 years old. She's a Holocaust survivor. She stands outside the White House every single day because she lost people in the Holocaust, and she's aware that what is going on now is a Holocaust. Do you have an answer for me? I'd really like to know.
Okay. I'm not here to debate. I will just say one thing. Being anti-Israel, anti-Israeli government is not anti-Semitic.
Okay. Well,
so hold that, guys, because we're going to hold her to that. Being anti-Israel and anti-Israel's government is not anti-Semitic. Everyone, make sure you hold her to that.
that's what the protests are about on campus.
No.
And you cited them several times. I have been to those protests.
Have you been to the ones at my house where they call?
Okay, let's go back a little bit because I want to show you something.
Have you been to the ones at my house where they call me Zionist trash and call for the Intifada against me?
Okay, I'm not going to single out the extremists. You talked about the protests on campus.
Those are extremists.
Those are not anti-Semitic.
So here is Dana Bash conflating two different incidents. The woman that is speaking to Dana Bash is talking about the way that she covered the campus protest. And for those of us that have been at the campus protest, and she was there, Code Pink was there, they know that what they were saying was not anti-Semitic, right? That's what the woman is explaining to Dana Bash. The way that you covered those campus protests was lies, just flat out lies. And again, this woman is very calm. Like I said, it couldn't have been me. Now Dana Bash wants to bring up the protest that happened outside her house. So as a commentator for CNN, you took what happened outside your house and you blended this with what occurred at the campus protest. Do you think that's responsible for a so-called journalist to do? For a so-called journalist to sit up there and to take one incident and to mix it with another one? These are two different situations. People protesting outside your house calling you a Zionist also is not anti-Semitic. Zionism and Judaism are two different things. So Dana Bash took what happened to her on the personal end and she chose to exhibit that when she covered Gaza and Israel. She took what happened to her at her house, the names, whatever she was called, etc., and she used that in her coverage when she covered these stories. So as far as I see it, Dana Bash should not be allowed to cover Israel and Gaza going forward, period. She has a bias there. I would have never known this if she didn't admit it. She told her that. The woman didn't ask her anything about protest outside her house. She volunteered that information. So you see what you did, Dana. You let everybody know that the reason why you have the position that you do on the news is because of what was said to you in private outside your house, not because of what happened at the campus protest. So you decided to take your personal experience and mix it into the stories. She should not be allowed to cover these stories.
Are not anti-Semitic.
There are many genuine pro-Palestinian protests.
But you have never said that on CNN News. You have never said that any of those protests on campus or any of the Palestinian protests were genuine. You attacked them at every chance that you got. You said negative things about them at every chance that you got. You never said anything positive about the pro-Palestinian protests. But now in private, you can say these things. But when you had a camera in front of your face on CNN, you smeared the protests, you smeared the students, you smeared the activists. Dana Bash is letting you know that she is just a propagandist. She's letting you know that she knew that those protests were genuine and she told you otherwise. What does that tell you about CNN? What does that tell you about corporate media? What does that tell you about Dana Bash and how she chose to cover those stories? You see, you didn't messed up. It reminds me of the movie Menace to Society. Speaking of a menace to society, there's a scene in the movie Menace to Society where the main character, he's in an interrogation room and a detective is asking him, where was he at the scene of the crime? And he starts to mess up his story a little bit. And the detective, some of you guys know who I'm talking about. I think his name is Duke. I think the actor's name is Duke. The detective who's sitting there, he goes, wait a minute. First you said that you were there. Now you're telling me that you are here. You know you done fucked up, right? Dana, you know you done fucked up, right? Bill Duke. Thank you. I knew you guys knew. Somebody knew in the chat. Red 6 said Bill Duke. Yeah. Watch Menace to Society. That's my favorite scene from that movie.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
What I am talking about are when people say from the river to the sea, they want to do away with the state of Israel. When they come to my house and go to other places.
Except that the Likud government says from the river to the sea.
What?
In the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, we're going to.
This is the journalist. This is the commentator. So the Code Pink activist is explaining to her the Likud government says that. Dana Bash's response is, what? You never heard this before, Dana. You didn't do your research, Dana. No, these people come to the studio, they sit down at a desk and they read a teleprompter. I know. I studied broadcast journalism in undergrad. I know how it works. I know what they do. How you not know? Stop calling these people journalists. You guys in the chat know this, but Dana Bash don't know this. You guys in the chat know more about what the Likud party has been saying, but Dana Bash don't know, and she paid to do this. How much are they paying her per year? You want to look it up, Eric, if you got time? Look up Dana Bash's salary, because we got people out there like Anderson Cooper making $20 million a year to lie. Rachel Maddow making $30 million a year to lie. But you guys who are watching this show, you know more than they do. Doesn't that seem a little bit weird to you? Doesn't know about the Likud party, the things that they have said from the river to the sea. Now, she even responded. She had the nerve to respond. You came to a place of Jewish worship, stood on the bima near the Holy Torah scroll, and pretended to be congregants. Didn't the woman say she was a member of the community? You have no shame, no decency, and no clue what you're talking about. I don't know if mine is still here. Is my response still here? Yeah, it is. I said, you appeared on people's TV screens and pretended Palestinians weren't sexually assaulted in detention centers. Your lying ass network is dying. So this whole, you have no clue what you're talking about. No, honey, you have no clue what you're talking about. And you're the commentator. Thank you, Eric. Dana Bash's salary is $1 million a year. This woman is paid $1 million a year to lie to you. And I'll show you some of the lies. This was probably the worst. This conversation that she had, this was, I believe, 11 months ago. This conversation that she had here with Pramila Jayapal. Listen to her.
You are hearing from Hamas leaders over and over again that the brutal massacre of the 1,200 Israeli civilians was just the beginning, just a rehearsal, and that they want to continue to do it over and over again. So a ceasefire would keep that brutal terrorist regime in place in Gaza.
I don't think that's true. I think that what is true is that Hamas needs to be taken out. It is a terrorist organization.
How would you do that?
But I think the way to do that, as many terrorism experts have said, is to create a durable and strong coalition of allies within the Middle East, with the United States, with Israel, to make sure that we have a long-term political solution, that there is an alternative to Hamas to lead in Gaza and to establish a state for Palestinians. This is, I mean, we have to condemn what Hamas did on October 7th. We cannot allow for 15,000 Palestinians to date to have been killed, 3/4 of whom are women and children, and say that that is going to help us in the long term.
Listen,
morally, Dana, morally, but also strategically for Israel. The only way through this is to create a situation where there is a political solution that involves a Palestinian state and an Israeli state.
I think ideally what you're talking about could make sense. It's just unclear how you get from here to there. Who's going to get rid of Hamas if there's no continued war? And I think what you're relying on is the pressure from Arab states, and they haven't been willing to do that.
It's not just.
Let me pause here for a second. So you see what Dana Bash was doing. She said, who's going to get rid of Hamas? That was 11 months ago. Is Hamas gone? Never mind that this is an ideology. So destroying the people that are a part of Hamas doesn't destroy the ideology, especially now, because the way that Israel has been killing so many women, so many children, innocent people, destroying Gaza. Notice how Dana responded when Pramila Jayapal talked about all the women, the innocent people that are being killed. Notice how Dana she didn't really want to hear about that. She didn't want to hear about that. She's there to be a mouthpiece for Zionism. How often do you sit up here and hear Dana bash Netanyahu or the Likud party? Now, she said it's okay to criticize the Israeli government, and that's not anti-Semitic. Do you ever hear Dana Bash criticize the Israeli government? Do you ever hear it? So we need to stop this. We ain't got to sit up here and ask, oh, what side are you on, or what do you feel? How do you believe? Get that out of here. We know what side Dana Bash is on, and we know she wants that war to continue. She don't give a damn about those Palestinian people.
Well, part of the reason they haven't been willing to do that is because we have been allowing Israel to literally indiscriminately bomb hospitals, violate international humanitarian law. And so we are creating
even pre-October.
enemies.
Okay, even pre-October 7th. Can I just ask you one more thing about that? You have seen the information and intelligence that Hamas has used its own civilians. The death of civilians it's horrendous. But Hamas has used its own civilians as human shields. Those hospitals and so forth are places where Hamas keeps weapons and keeps its Hamas leadership, that they had their headquarters there.
Dana.
And you can tell she has no idea what she's just repeating State Department talking points. Do you see this? I just wanted to remind you guys, this is why she was confronted.
International humanitarian law says that you cannot attack a hospital unless there are some circumstances. If rockets are fired from that hospital, that is one thing. But hospitals are protected. We have had refugee camps that are bombed. Right now, there are even the only pediatric hospital in Gaza is not operating. If we want to defeat terrorists, we have to abide by international humanitarian law. That is just my fundamental belief. And that at the end of the day, what we need is a lasting coalition that is not going to be formed if Israel continues to do what they are doing. And the United States cannot be backers of this kind of indiscriminate bombing. That is my firm belief. We should have conditions on military aid in the same way that we do for every other country.
I want to ask.
I just want to remind everyone that after this interview, Pramila Jayapal got such incredible pushback from the ADL and from AIPAC, which, by the way, she doesn't even take money from AIPAC, but so much pushback that she had to change her statement online after this interview. That goes to show you just how much these lobbying groups have. She went and she changed her which she should have never done. She should have never changed it, because what she said was true. We should not continue to give them weapons. Listen to what Dana says.
To you about sexual violence.
Here we go.
It's kind of remarkable that this issue hasn't gotten enough attention globally. Widespread use of rape, brutal rape, sexual violence against Israeli women by Hamas. I've seen a lot of progressive women, generally speaking, they're quick to defend women's rights and speak out against using rape as a weapon of war, but downright silent on what we saw on October 7th and what might be happening inside Gaza right now to these hostages. Why is that?
Pause. First and foremost, notice what Dana Bash does here. Notice how anything that happened to the Israelis is brutal. When she talks about the attacks on October 7th, she said the brutal attacks on Israelis. When she talks about the sexual assault, which, by the way, till this day, there is no evidence of, we have to continue to say that. It's brutal attacks. But whenever it's brought up, whenever they talk about the women and the children in Gaza, the people being killed in Gaza, she never uses the word brutal to define or to describe what has happened to the Palestinians. And in her own words and in her own twisted way, that is Dana Bash letting you know that she feels as though the Palestinians do not matter as much as the Israelis. Everyone has to pick up on the vocabulary. I have noticed this time and time again. Whenever you see people do that, when they will use the words brutal, horrific to describe what happened to the Israelis, but they never use those words to describe what has happened to the Palestinian people, they are telling you in their own covert way that the Palestinians don't matter as much as the Israelis. This woman sat up there and spread lie after lie after lie.
I mean, I don't know that that's true. I think we always talk about the impact of war on women in particular. In fact, I remember 20 years ago, I did a petition around the war in Iraq.
Have you talked about it since October 7th?
And I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
specifically
all of
women?
the actions. Absolutely. The rape, of course. But I think we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours. And if they do not comply with international humanitarian law, they are bringing themselves to a place that makes it much more difficult strategically for them to be able to build the kinds of allies to keep public opinion with them. And frankly, morally, I think we cannot say that one war crime deserves another. That is not what international humanitarian law says.
Okay, with respect, I was just asking about the women, and you turned it back to Israel.
So do you see this? You see what she did here? By the way, this entire segment should have been, honestly, CNN should have issued a statement after this segment. This was Dana Bash being on the side of Israel. Did you see what she just did? She's like, I'm talking about what happened to these women, which again, there was no evidence for. Even the New York Times had to remove the article. No evidence for. I'm talking about the women, what happened to them, and you mentioned Israel. That was Dana Bash being biased. She should have never been allowed to continue to cover these stories after this interview. Never been allowed to do that. And they let her to continue to do it anyway.
I'm asking you about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that rape is horrific, sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. However, I think we have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians. 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I think
that was false. That was false. There were videotapes of IDF soldiers sexually assaulting Palestinians in the detention center. So there was Dana Bash blatantly lying. Does everybody see the problem with this? That's why you were confronted, Dana. You have told lie after lie after lie. There is no way that this woman should be able to continue to cover these stories on that network. And there should have been a push for Dana Bash to resign from CNN. She was telling multiple lies in a row. She was there to defend and protect Israel, and that is why she was confronted, and she's still lying now. That woman is not a journalist. She sits at a desk and she reads a teleprompter. I don't even have a damn teleprompter in front of me, but I have a brain. And I'm not attached to the State Department. I ain't got to repeat their damn talking points. That is why people are moving away from CNN and MSNBC, and they wonder why their ratings are so bad. And they wonder why they're going to have more layoffs. And they wonder why people are abandoning their network. You were not giving news. You were giving propaganda. And you deserve to be confronted. That's what I got to say about that. What a mess. And that's what people wanted you to vote for. By the way, Kamala Harris spread those same lies. Donald Trump spread those same lies. There was no evidence of that till this day. Get out of here. Let's go to some of the comments in the chat. I can make sure I'm going to the right thing. Okay. Thank you, Trust and Success. It's sad that Van Jones was actually an activist. Once upon a time, they target those people. I'm telling you, they'll come to our activists and say, hey, you should do this. Da, da, da. Thank you, Social Emotional. Why not also sue the Nation of Islam? You have to talk to his family about that. Thank you, Wanker Tanker. The U.S. is dishonorable empire. It's relevant. Mike says Rania is a journalist. Dana Bash is a propagandist. I agree with you. Thank you, Boaz. BB's son, Yair, I don't know how you pronounce his name, Yair, has the forbidden phrase on his IG. Interesting. I don't spend a lot of time on Instagram, but interesting. Thank you. I know myself. Dana is acting. She is just repeating State Department. Power to the diaspora. My mom's cousin was married to Huey P. Newton's brother, and our home phone was bugged for years. Holy crap. Thank you, Social. Malcolm was bisexual too, by the way. Smile. I don't know that. Allegedly, I'm gonna say allegedly because y'all ain't coming after me. His family ain't coming after me. I'll let you know. Allegedly. Thank you, Golden Science. Or silence. Zionist thugs went to Netherlands soccer match. They beat up Arabs and Dutch citizens indiscriminately. We were told the perpetrators are anti-Semite. Thank you, With Our Eyes. Consciousness, peace, uhuru, Sabs. Be aware that Mount Kenya is the true Mount Zion, the holy mountain of peace, our ancient text. Our power for global peace comes with facing Mount Kenya. Check out Green Lover's Dream. Thank you. Thank you, Janine. Before he was bought out by Is It Real, even Elon said Hamas couldn't be bombed away. These people deserve whatever the universe gets them. Yeah, I remember that video. Thank you, Janice. During the Nuremberg trials, journalists who broadcast the Austrian guy's propaganda were tried and sentenced as the war criminals they are. Bash is digging the hole deeper for herself. Yeah. I don't think Dana Bash will be tried. I mean, I think that people like Dana Bash, Anderson Cooper, I think they're very protected. Very much so. Alrighty. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash the like. Thank you. And we're going to move on to the next story here. Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi Hassan. It's a long story. Mehdi Hassan was one of the commentators that was very critical of Israel, still very critical of Israel. But the moment that it appeared that Kamala Harris was the nominee, Mehdi Hassan was ready to just jump right on board. Otherwise, you're going to get a Trump. He was one of those people. Well, now Mehdi Hassan is on Joy Reid, and he's actually trying to lie about some of the Muslim voters, saying that they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. Now all of a sudden, Joy Reid, all of you guys, now all of a sudden you care so much about those Palestinian people. Oh my God, look at who Donald Trump just appointed as the Israel person. Look who he just appointed as the Israel ambassador. What's going to happen to those Palestinians? But when Kamala Harris was the nominee and Joe Biden was president and still is president now, you didn't have that same amount of sympathy. You would talk about it every now and then, but you didn't have the same amount of concern that you have right now, Joy. You didn't have that same amount of shock that you do now that Mike Huckabee has been announced as that pick for Donald Trump, which again does not surprise me. I told you both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were pro-Israel, and they were going to continue to help and aid Israel. But now that Trump is about to come in, you'll notice the rhetoric is starting to change, and Mehdi Hassan is going along with it. He's on this show with Joy. You got to hear this, guys. He's going to try to make it seem like the voters were dumb and didn't know what they were doing. Let's go on.
The plight of the Palestinian people will soon be in the hands of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who was Trump's choice for U.S. ambassador to Israel, and a man who does not believe Palestinians even exist. The selection of Huckabee, a right-wing Christian evangelical who is an unapologetic Christian Zionist, is an open acknowledgement that a two-state solution, that's dead. Here's what Huckabee thinks about regional issues.
Pause. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay for her to criticize Christian Zionists. Why didn't she criticize Joe Biden for being a Christian Zionist? Didn't hear her say anything about Joe Biden being a Christian Zionist. But because this is someone that Trump appointed, now all of a sudden you have a critique of Christian Zionism. You didn't before. It's how the game is played. I hope all these people get fired. I'm gonna keep it real with the ratings and everything. Joy, Anderson, all you guys. I hope all these people get fired. Won't feel no shade because you just been lying and lying and lying.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian.
I think it's time for us to quit playing this pretentious game that there's going to be a two-state solution where both sides share the same country and real estate and streets, because they're not.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities.
So everybody hear this, right? So Mike Huckabee is absolutely terrible. I have no shame in saying that. How can you say there's no West Bank when it's literally on the map, right? So these are just blatant lies. Again, he's another one, Christian Zionist. But that being said, where was this same criticism when these comments about Israel first and screw the Palestinian, all this stuff, when those comments came from Josh Shapiro, where was this criticism, Joy? You didn't critique him because he's a Democrat and because Kamala Harris was considering him to be a VP. That's the thing. It's not just Mike Huckabee. It's Richie Torres. Why didn't you say anything about some of the nasty, disgusting things that Richie Torres has said about the Palestinians? Why didn't you say anything, Joy? Because he's a Democrat, because he's a part of her party. And MSNBC is a left-leaning show. Let's continue.
That's pretty clear. The news of Huckabee's selection was celebrated by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's most extremist coalition members because he is also a huge proponent of settlements in the West Bank. Huckabee will be joined by Steve Witkoff, who will step into the role of envoy to the Middle East. Witkoff has no prior experience in Middle East politics, but he too is a big backer of settlements, and he likes to golf with Trump, which is all the expertise you really need in this upcoming administration.
And we're going to pause here. And thank you for mentioning Biden again, Ashura, because here's the thing. Biden also wasn't willing to criticize the settlements. See, these are the things they're not calling out. Joe Biden also didn't really have a problem with the settlements. So I don't know, Kamala said something about it when she was questioned about it. But for the most part, the Biden-Harris administration, they weren't touching this issue. Had it not been for October 7th, they probably wouldn't have been questioned about this issue. But Joe Biden really was not against the settlements. Antony Blinken, not really against the settlements. Joy Reid wants you to think they were. They weren't.
Joining me now is Mehdi Hassan, editor-in-chief and CEO of Zeteo. Mehdi, you, before the election, made the very clear-eyed assessment that folks who really don't like the Biden policies on Israel and Palestine are going to really hate it if Trump takes over. You turned out to be absolutely right. Let's talk about this new team. Your thoughts on them. Huckabee et al.
So this is Joy Reid trying to run cover for the genocide that's happened under Biden and Kamala. And this is not, I'm not here to make excuses for Donald Trump and his team at all. What I am here to show you, though, is that they don't really, till this now, Joy still don't want to call it a genocide. Still don't want to. Now watch, if more happens under Trump, watch more happen under Trump, and then all of a sudden she'll be okay with calling it a genocide. How can you say this to these people? How can you say this to these people that have lost entire family lines? How can you just say, well, it's going to be really, really even worse under Donald Trump after you've killed all these people? I don't know why you keep this job, Joy. I don't know why you keep this job. And by the way, Joy Reid is Congolese. There is a genocide happening in the Congo. You would think she would understand. And maybe she does understand, but she pretends not to keep her job. So you can't tell me Joy Reid don't know about international affairs. She don't know about the genocides that's happening abroad. She is Congolese. Her people are actively being genocided right now.
Oh, sadly, Joy, it's happened very quickly. The Trump appointments, one is worse than the next. I was writing a Guardian column this week about the Trump cabinet and the hawks in the cabinet. I had to keep updating it before I could file the piece. Because every few minutes it was one more. It was Huckabee, then it was Hexeth. One hawk after another. Donald Trump is not a dove. Donald Trump is not a peacemaker. Anyone who believed that was, lying to themselves or deluded. Trump's first term showed us that he was a hawk on Israel and a hawk in general. The people he's appointed are just really out there. I mean, Peter Hexeth, who called for a preemptive strike on North Korea, is going to be in charge of the Defense Department and nuclear weapons. And on Israel.
Pause. So where was this commentary about all the war hawks and war criminals that Kamala Harris added to her campaign? Where was this? I didn't see Joy and Mehdi sit down and have a conversation about Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, like all these like warmongering Republicans that Kamala Harris was adding to her campaign. I didn't hear them say anything about this or have this conversation. What do you guys think would have happened under Kamala Harris? You really sit up here and think that Liz Cheney wouldn't have been added to Kamala Harris's cabinet? Kamala Harris told you right on The View, I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet. I am proud to have received an endorsement from Dick Cheney. Mr. Iraq War himself. These are terrible people. Terrible people. So my thing is just be consistent. That's all I'm asking for. Be consistent. Now all of a sudden you guys are going to pretend like you care. Now all of a sudden you care so much more about what's happening to the Palestinian people when you guys sat there and you made so many excuses for Joe Biden, for Kamala Harris. And like I said before, Joy Reid knows better. What a mess.
Israel, Palestine, where in a place like Dearborn, we saw a lot of Arabs understandably frustrated and enraged by what Biden and Harris did to Gaza, armed Netanyahu. Some of them, and I interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, fell into the trap of thinking Donald Trump would be not as bad or equally as bad or better. And we're seeing with Huckabee, I mean, Huckabee, Joy, and your intro is so important.
Pause. Let's go back to this for a second because, hold on.
Equally as bad or better. And we're
sorry, let's go back here. Listen to this.
Did to Gaza, armed Netanyahu. Some of them, and I interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, fell into the trap of thinking Donald Trump would be not as bad or equally as bad or better. And with
pause. So he interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, one person, and said, well, some of them thought that Donald Trump would be better or equally as bad. The majority of Muslim voters in Michigan did not think that. You see the propaganda? The majority of Muslim voters in Michigan did not think that. The majority of Muslim voters in Michigan basically were saying they're willing to accept it, right? We have to remember what happened with the vote. The majority of Muslim voters voted for Jill Stein. That right there tells you that the majority did not believe that Donald Trump would be the same or better. Jill Stein won the Muslim vote in Michigan and nationwide. So why are we, these are the things that people really got to understand. Mehdi Hassan interviewed one person and he is talking about it as though that one person that he spoke to is speaking for everybody else. If you really want to know how the Muslim voters felt in Michigan, you can watch Rania Khalek was there. She was there when Donald Trump came to visit Dearborn. The majority of people were not happy to see him. The majority of Muslim voters did not want him there. It's all on camera. So these are the kind of things that you have to take into perspective. I don't want anyone walking away from the show thinking that all of the Muslim voters who voted for Trump thought that. That's not true. What ideally happened is that even some of them that were going to vote for Jill Stein or Cornel West decided in the end that they wanted to make sure that Kamala did not win. And they were concerned that if they were to all support Jill Stein, then Kamala could still win. So some of them, to punish Kamala, voted for Donald Trump. That does not mean that they thought he was going to be better. It was more so them wanting to punish Donald Trump. If you watch the interview of the members from Abandon Harris that Breonna Joy Gray just did recently on Bad Faith, watch the interview. They explain this. Watch the interviews I've done. Watch the ones we did on RBN with Abandon. They explain this, what happened. So I think it is disingenuous for Mehdi Hassan to pretend here and make it seem like, oh yeah, these people actually thought that Donald Trump was going to be so much better. That is a select few, not the majority and not even half. Jesus Christ.
Seeing with Huckabee, I mean, Huckabee, Joy, and your intro is so important there. He's not just to call him an extremist is an insult to other extremists, right? He's so extreme, he makes Benjamin Netanyahu look moderate on Palestine. He makes George W. Bush look moderate on issues of war and peace. In 2008, Joy, Mike Huckabee criticized George Bush for setting a timetable for withdrawal from Iraq. He wanted to stay in Iraq for longer. He's a big Iraq war guy. And on Palestine, as you say, he calls himself an unreformed, unapologetic Zionist. He believes God gave the land only to the Jews. He's a religious fanatic. He refuses to admit that there's a Palestinian people. He says there's no occupation, no settlements, no West Bank, only Judea and Samaria. He wants one state, a Jewish state, no Palestinian state. It's a disaster in many ways. Obviously, the Palestinians are already living living through a disaster in Gaza.
Yeah.
And then the West Bank, it's only going to get worse.
Pause, because he brought up the West Bank. The West Bank is getting worse right now under Biden as well. It's not like this is just going to start happening under Trump's administration. Don't forget, we covered the story about the biggest land expansion in the West Bank. We covered that story a couple of months ago, that they had already been given the green light to do that Israel already got the green light to do that. So I'm reminding you of this because come 2025, all of a sudden, liberals like Joy Reid and all the other commentators are going to pretend like that news story didn't happen. They're going to pretend like this all just happened under Trump's administration when they are already doing it now. So don't forget that. Jesus Christ. This is why Mehdi Hassan blocked me, because he knew what I said was true. When I told him is that the idea you don't reward people for a freaking genocide. He blocked me after that. You won't see him come on here and have this conversation because he knows what I'm saying is true. And Mehdi Hassan is a freaking propagandist his damn self. Don't get confused. Some of these commentators that left corporate media are still operating in a corporate way. They're still talking about the status quo. They're still repeating corporate media talking points. This is a fad. You saw it with Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo, Mehdi Hassan. These people, they're telling you they're independent. Are they truly independent? Who funded Zateo? Who funded this new news network of Mehdi? Where'd that money come from? Ask those questions. And two, if they were so fully removed from, why are they still going back onto corporate media? Why is Mehdi Hassan still coming back on to MSNBC, CNN? Why is he still coming into he is repeating the status quo and going with the status quo because he still wants to be able to be invited into those spaces. Never forget that. Don't fall for this.
You know, the idea of the way that power works is that you have to set yourself up in a position where you can negotiate. What the pro-Palestinian movement, and as you said, it's a righteous cause in the sense that these people are really suffering in Gaza. What they're now going to get is an administration that you can't even protest because you now have Pete Hegseth in charge of the military and Trump saying he thinks you should deport or shoot protesters. So now there's no avenue for protest at all. And this is the
pause. So let's think about what Joy just said. First of all, everyone has the right to protest in this country. But I want to be very clear about something. Obviously, I'm heavily against that. I'm heavily against Donald Trump trying to stop people to protest, stopping people from, expressing their voice. Heavily against that. Hell no. That being said, let's not sit here and pretend like the Biden-Harris administration didn't crack down on protests either. Let's not sit here and pretend like they didn't send in the police to crack down on the protesters. Let's not sit here and pretend that Kamala Harris didn't call the student protesters anti-Semitic. We covered that on this show. You literally had cops beating these kids. I saw videos of cops dragging faculty members on the ground. And all of them are going to forget these things happen come 2025. Watch. If the police attack protesters under Trump administration, watch how Joy Reid and all of them are going to change gears. Watch.
Piece you're talking about, this is the Guardian piece. You made a really good point that people voted for Trump in part, some of them, saying he was the peace candidate. He dropped more drones in 2 years than Obama dropped in 8.
So now all of a sudden you guys care about these wars, right? When people were complaining about the war in Ukraine, you were out there calling people Russian Putin puppets and all that. Now all of a sudden you care about how many bombs are dropped. Now all of a sudden you care about these wars. Now, to that point, I don't know why some people thought that Trump was anti-war or a peace person. I told you over and over on the show that was not the case. I told you about what happened under his presidency, whether it was Syria, whether it was Venezuela. I told you this over and over and over again. But for whatever reason, some people, and some of them were libertarians, some of them conservatives, some of them independent, some of them just like, I don't give a damn. For whatever reason, some people believe that because he didn't create a new war. I mean, just because you don't create a new war doesn't mean you're anti-war. You ain't stopped no damn wars either. So always keep that in mind. But now all of a sudden they care. Now they care about war.
Yeah. We've memory hold the first Trump presidency, the drone strikes, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the bombing of Syria, the bombing of Iraq, the bombing of Somalia, the bombing of Afghanistan with the Moab, the mother of all bombs. This guy was not a peace candidate. In fact, he pardoned literal war criminals. And guess who told him to pardon those war criminals? Pete Hegseth, his new defense secretary. The guy running the Pentagon is the guy who thinks, war criminals, fine. So it's a very worrying state of affairs. I think if you're worried about war with Iran, you look at all the Iran hawks who are in the administration, Marco Rubio, its Secretary of State, very hawkish. Neocons, as I say in the Guardian piece.
Neocons. The same neocons that were a part of Kamala Harris's campaign? Joy, now all of a sudden it's neocons. It was no neocon when Liz Cheney was added to the ticket, was added to the campaign. What are you talking about? Neocons. Oh no, here come the neocons. Now all of a sudden everybody cares. You guys deserve to lose the ratings that you're losing. You guys deserve the drop off. You're so fake, and you can't even be fake the right way. God damn. Some people are at least good at being fake the right way. You're not even convincingly fake.
Trump has the same playbook. He attacks neocons on the campaign trail, wins, and then hires neocons. John Bolton in term one, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, this time round Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Elise Stefanik, Mike Huckabee, who's even worse than neocon. He's a Christian evangelical Zionist who thinks end of times is going to come about quicker if we have some major war on Israel's behalf in the Middle East.
Pause. I don't think Nikki Haley was hired. Last time I checked, Nikki Haley was not assigned. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I would have heard that announcement. I don't think Nikki Haley was hired at all. I think he's just adding in names.
Yeah, he's also hired an aide to Dick Cheney, even after having said that Dick Cheney's daughter should have guns trained on her face. Last thing.
Wait a minute. See, you see the tell? Dick Cheney. Where was this criticism about Dick Cheney when Kamala Harris bragged about Dick Cheney giving her an endorsement? Where was that same criticism, Joy? Yeah, exactly. Dick Cheney. Where was that? Not there. Not there. Where? I hope everybody sees the mask that has fallen off of MSNBC, CNN, all corporate media. I hope you guys see the mask that has fallen off. Now, all of a sudden, you care about Dick Cheney. Now, all of a sudden, Dick Cheney is a problem. But he wasn't a problem when he endorsed Kamala.
The ambassador from Israel to the U.S. is when he was young, was a Meir Kahane supporter.
Yes.
Just very quickly, who is Meir Kahane? Watch people know that.
Meir Kahane was an extremist, a terrorist. And this is not just me throwing out a name. The Jewish Defense League, which the new ambassador to the United States was a member of, was a designated terrorist organization until just a few years ago here in the United States. Think about how crazy that is. Netanyahu is sending a guy who the United States considered a member of a terrorist group to be the ambassador.
Sometimes elections have really terrifying consequences. Mehdi Hassan, thank you very much, my friend.
So here they are blaming the voters. Elections have terrible consequences. So it's not the voters' fault that Kamala Harris lost. It's Kamala Harris's fault. Because you know what? There are a number of people that said if she would have agreed to an arms embargo, if she would agree to a permanent ceasefire, Kamala Harris would have gotten her vote. And by the way, this is not just the Muslim community. There are a number of Democrats who said that, independents who said that, young voters who said that are not Muslim voters. It was not just the Muslim voting community that said, I'm not going to vote for you because of Israel and Gaza. I didn't vote for them. A lot of you didn't vote for them. It wasn't just the Muslim voters. So here they go with, well, these elections do have consequences. Bad tactic. Bad tactic. Don't blame the voters. Blame the candidate. Because if Kamala Harris really wanted those votes, she would have been able to agree to the demands that they wanted. You got a candidate out here. She wasn't even running on a goddamn real minimum wage amount for people. Couldn't even do the bare minimum of $15 minimum wage, which at this point is not even enough to survive off of. But she couldn't even do that. And you want to sit up here and point fingers at the voters. Get the fuck out of here, Joy. Ain't no joy with you, Joy. Ain't no joy with you. Let's go to the comments in the chat. What a joke. Shell News said, I just subscribed to your channel, Sabby. I like your honesty. Oh, thank you and welcome. What's up, Wendy? Thank you. Establishment types don't care about the U.S. committing mass murder abroad. I hear you. Thank you. I know myself. Mehdi and Joyless were assimilated by the Borg. So you're a Trekkie. Thank you, John. Do you think Jon Stewart should run for president in 2028? He's certainly likable and charismatic enough. I don't know. Like I kind of had it with the celebrity stuff. Like I don't think celebrities should be running. Like that's kind of my thing, you know? Like I remember a couple years ago, people said that Oprah should run, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. I think Jon Stewart should just stay. He also backs off on positions sometimes too. Like he'll have a progressive like take, and then as soon as he gets pushed back, he'll back away from it. So no, I think he just needs to stay a comedian there, buddy. Thank you, Lawn Guy. It seems like kids in cages all over again. Yep. I'm telling you, wait for it, guys. Thank you, Trust and Success. I'm hoping under Trump, corporate media will cover the slaughter truthfully because Trump is in office. They'll blame everything on Trump, but viewers will finally see the truth. Yeah, I think they're going to do that, you know, and maybe then maybe some of the Kamala supporters will have more sympathy for what the Palestinians are going through. It's crazy. Thank you, Lada. Hi, Sabby. You are right. It's more and more obvious that people voted for Trump, but not for Trump, but rather against the Democrats. And shout out to Blarg, who gifted 1 Sabby membership. Thank you. And to whoever received that, congratulations. All I gotta say, congratulations. All right, guys, we are moving on to our next story. This is interesting. And when I say it's a long story, it's a long story. So apparently, somehow, and I don't know how she did it, but Rania Khalek had an interview with Jamal Bowman. Now, this is kind of a shock to those of us on the left because the squad members, for the most part, once they enter Congress, they were not doing interviews with left independent media. So I was surprised when this interview appeared, and it was on my homepage on YouTube. I was like, what? And so I was like, let me listen to this and see what he's talking about, right? So Jamal Bowman, now that he is no longer a member of Congress, has a lot to say about what went down when he was a member of Congress. It's a long story, but he's going to get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to hear this. Grab some tea because it is hot in here. Listen to this.
Wait, I want to stop you right there because I actually like with the J Street trip, right? Because I remember you went on the J Street trip and this upset many Palestinian rights advocates who felt it was like normalizing with Israel and Zionists. So can you explain your thinking with that at that time? And I'm just curious if you saw that backlash, if it made you maybe reconsider it all, and then what made you decide to go anyway?
So probably a lot of the advocates and organizers that you're talking about, I probably didn't know them or wasn't aware of them or not in community with them at that time. Me personally, maybe the Justice Democrats were, maybe my chief of staff was, but my whole mindset was, I got a large Jewish constituency, right? I need to go there because I can't be talking out my ass and I never been there, right? And so I already knew what I felt like as I was reading and talking to people and learning, because I was fortunate. I had like Jewish Voices for Peace and If Not Now and others who were like advising me before I went there, right? And before and during the race. So I was familiar with it, right? I was familiar with the Nakba. I was familiar with we don't have 2 states. I was familiar with 67 borders, right? And like how because of 700,000 settlements, we don't have, 67 borders are like obsolete. So I was familiar with all that, but I wanted to go to experience it because it gives me more credibility when I talk about it coming back. If I'm talking about it without going, it's less credibility, right?
Pause. So why was this controversial at the time? It was controversial because Jamal Bowman was a member of DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. And one of the things that they are not supposed to do is they are not supposed to go to Israel, right? So DSA, they have a whole section in their handbook that discusses the Israel-Gaza, Palestine issue. And what they're supposed to do is to support BDS, obviously understand the history, the creation of Israel and what it did to the Palestinian people, but also the big one, they're not supposed to go to Israel. So Jamal Bowman broke that line. And after that, there were strong discussions about removing Jamal Bowman from DSA. So let's continue.
And, on a personal level, Rashida's like my sister, right? I love her. And I remember when they stopped her from going to see her grandmother.
Yeah.
And I remember wanting to go on a personal level, like I'm going to go and I'm going to go see her grandmother. So anyway, I went. I went with J Street. And again, at this time, J Street is, in my mind, not AIPAC light, but like a little bit more progressive than AIPAC, right? So they're like the good progressive group at this time. And so I went with them. And I still give them credit, right? Because when I went, in my opinion, it wasn't no propaganda trip, right? It was, we spoke to breaking the silence, right? We went to Ramallah and spoke to leaders. We went to Hebron and visited a school and spoke to children. I was stopped at a checkpoint and I couldn't walk by. We spoke to organizers. I'm forgetting the name. There's a group of like Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinians. Forgive me if I'm mislabeling them, but there's a group working together. What's the name of them?
One of these. They have these like peace, quote unquote peace groups where like the two sides talk.
Correct. So I got to meet with scholars from the whole spectrum and organizers and activists from the whole spectrum. So I really appreciated the trip, right? You can't, like when you go, I wasn't allowed to go to Gaza because we couldn't get clearance from the U.S. or Israel. So I only got to go to West Bank, Palestine. When you go, first of all, like there's like gates and shit to get into the West Bank, right? So that's right there bugged out. There's a giant wall around the shit, right? Mm-hmm. There's burned out cars stacked on top of each other. There's abject poverty. There's checkpoints everywhere. You can't move. When you experience that, that's why Ta-Nehisi Coates talking about it now. Like, I know exactly what he means, right? Like, segregation, Jim Crow, and all that, it's in a black man's DNA, especially when you're a conscious black man, which I try to be. And so when I went there and experienced that, I'm like, this is crazy. And so anyway, November, my first term, I went there, came back and, again, got more active, got more vocal and, and a couple of other pivot points. And I'm probably, jumping around in terms of time.
No, that's totally fine.
Initially, like I supported the Oslo Accords, right? And then I took my name off it, right? The so-called peace agreement, the normalization peace agreement, right? So like that experience may help make that shift, for example. Rashida had a Nakba resolution, like right around the time of the end of my first re-election, and I like co-sponsored it, right? And this obviously got me a bunch of backlash. So it's basically the more I learned, the more I spoke out and just became more active.
And then, I just, it's really interesting because, J Street, obviously, like for those of us who've been inside the Palestine solidarity movement, and it's been like kind of our number one thing. It's like, we're very antagonistic towards J Street because it's still a Zionist organization, right? And so it's interesting that their trip for you had that impact on you, but I also think it's interesting what you're saying about being there as a black man. And it's similar to what Ta-Nehisi Coates describes as well, which is like, you can't not see segregation when it's right in front of your face. I'm curious if, I guess moving past your trip there, obviously you come out with a different understanding. Then October 7th happens. And then I'm curious how October 7th may have shifted your view of this issue, because I think it radicalized everybody more than they already were, because it really demonstrated just how genocidal the Israeli project is. But you were also still you're still in Congress now. But you're before your primary, you were also criticized widely. Here's another tough question: criticized widely on the left for voting for the Iron Dome. It'll come as no surprise to you that I personally definitely shared the criticism of voting for the Iron Dome for the fact that it's the Iron Dome is. I know it's promoted as a defensive mechanism, but it essentially shields Israel from the consequences for bombing all of its neighbors, for constantly stealing land. I guess my question is, and I think a lot of people who are watching would wonder, why did you vote for it? And has your view of the Iron Dome changed today from when you did vote for that bill?
Yes, Rania, yes. That is the question, because a lot of us remember when some of them voted for the Iron Dome. I think AOC ended up voting present. And that was another moment where their vote, because they had that narrow majority, their vote could have made a significant difference, right? The Iron Dome vote happened first, and then October 7th happened. So thank you, Rania, for asking that question, because I wanted to know too, girl.
View has definitely changed. And at that time when I voted for it, I would say, let's say my learning and evolution is like an A to Z process. At that time when I voted for it, I was probably at like a G or H in the process, right, of learning. But I think, even taking a step back away from that, I still have a large Jewish constituency, and I do have a responsibility to represent all constituents in my district. And if the majority of them wanted me to vote for the Iron Dome, which they did, it's part of my responsibility to vote for that. That, in addition to that, communication and propaganda is a big part of our business, right? Of our work. And so I didn't want to send the perception or misperception that I was okay with Jewish people being killed. Again, this is at this time of my evolution, right? So I didn't want my district to think, oh, he doesn't care if we get bombed and killed, which wasn't true. I don't want nobody to be killed, including Palestinians.
So what that tells you, ladies and gentlemen, is that there was pressure from a certain demographic of his constituents for him to vote for that bill. But it also tells you that he did not know what he was really voting on. This is a problem. But I mean, honestly, how many times are these representatives voting on bills and they don't really know what they're voting on? And they're just voting the way they were told to vote. So he didn't really fully understand what the Iron Dome was. So this is not a good thing. I mean, he's openly admitting this. And again, if Jamal Bowman would have won his race, he would not be having this conversation. I can probably assure you that. But we're getting the tea now, right? So it makes you wonder how many representatives are voting on legislation and they're not really aware what they're voting on.
So I was then. Of course, now, right? So first of all, on my trip, there was this moment where an Israeli soldier is giving us a tour of we got to see the Iron Dome and what it was, the defense system. And during this tour, I said something like, why don't Palestinians have an Iron Dome? And you should have seen how this dude jumped out his skin to attack me for even asking the question.
Wow.
And I'm like, they got a right to defend themselves too. You know what I'm saying? And if it's just a defense system, they need to be able to defend themselves from missiles coming, right? So that was my logic. So even on that trip, I asked the question and his answer was bugged out. But fast forward to now, of course, the Iron Dome is a representation and another weapon to use in continued apartheid, oppression, open air prison, occupation, and now the genocide, but ultimately the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, right?
But Jamal Bowman, if you guys would have still been in the know with left independent media, again, like I said, all these people were on left independent media, and then once they won their races, they just pieced out. You never saw these people. It was just like they were only appear onto corporate media, right? So if Jamal Bowman and other members of the squad, if they would have still kept the community that they had in left independent media, and they still would have been appearing on left independent media, you would have known that, Jamal. Like, that's the thing. There are a number of people in left independent media that are very good on this issue, like Katie Halper. Like, Katie Halper is obviously very good on this issue, and she's interviewed squad members before like they won, right? So if you would have had this conversation, if you still would have been engaging with left independent media, you would have known that. You would have known what the Iron Dome really was about. But you guys decided to distance yourself from left independent media the moment that you won those seats. And so you can't really, I mean, I didn't feel like he was really trying to know either. I didn't feel like he was really trying to find out and know either, because he said that Rashida is like a sister to him. Rashida Tlaib knows about the Iron Dome. She knows, the bad things about the Iron Dome. So you said she's like a sister to you, but you didn't go to her and ask her for the Palestinian perspective about the Iron Dome. You spoke to, your Jewish constituents, but you didn't go to the woman who's like a sister to you to ask her about the Palestinian perspective. Am I alone in this?
And so that's why I'm like, not only would I never vote for that again if I was still in Congress, unless there was okay, we're going to actually have a Palestinian state, 67 borders, get like our dream. Like, if our dream come true, where Palestine has a full military and everything it needs, whatever. But right now, no, that wouldn't be the case, because we see what's happening now, and it's freaking crazy.
Okay, that's one piece. Please go watch the full interview, and if you're a patron, you get to see there's this interview, which is 39 minutes. But if you're a patron of Breakthrough News, you get to see the full interview, which is a little bit over an hour, I believe. So watch that. But then there's this part as well, because this right here tells me he gets into Kamala Harris's campaign. And I did not know about this until this interview. And when you hear this from Jamal Bowman, what this is going to tell you is that almost kind of sounds like they weren't really trying to win. Is it a long story? Maybe, maybe not. Listen to this.
Oh, there was a lot of pressure.
Oh, wait, is this the wrong one? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. I went to the wrong one. Here we go. Them not trying to win. Listen to this.
A couple of days after my race, I was completely exhausted, but I still went to a commitment that I had at Georgetown University to speak to some young people. And it was a great meeting, great conversation. And one of the young people asked me, can the Democratic Party be reformed? And my instinctive answer was no. Like, the Democratic Party cannot be reformed. This is 2 days after my primary. Now, obviously, I might have been bitter and upset and all those things, but it's how I felt at the time, because the way it went down in my race was crazy. And that was a microcosm of what just happened with Trump. Like, you discard a middle school principal, Black, working class, that young people and working class people actually love, not just in this district, but nationally. You allow them to be attacked, discarded by AIPAC money, which is both Trump money and, crypto money and all kind of other stuff. Y'all allow that to happen. And then several months later, you need those same people that Jamal represented to help you win, and you don't engage them and you get crushed. And even more importantly, or as important, another anecdote for you. And by the way, these are all exclusives. I'm giving you mad exclusive. I ain't say these things nowhere else.
Breaking news.
But I engaged the Harris campaign, and I want to emphasize this, right? Because I love Black people, And I love all people, but I really love black people. And so I give Kamala Harris a bunch of grace because she's a black woman, right? So when I say Harris campaign, I don't mean her necessarily. I mean these people around her, which I know.
So he's talking about the consultants, right? He's talking about the consultant group for Kamala's campaign.
People around her, which I know the consultant class is crazy. I engage them first around the black man's agenda, like I organized black men from across the country to give me feedback, got them their agenda. Much of what we gave them made to the agenda. Good money. I then told them, I can share text with you so you have evidence of this. I am ready to be dispatched to any parts of the country. Let me know. I want to go to Michigan in particular, right? I told them this.
So this is something that you guys, we didn't know. So apparently Jamal Bowman offered to help Kamala Harris's campaign in Michigan because apparently he does have a popular following. Apparently he's popular in Michigan. So he offered to help in particular, especially because of the Gaza issue. Listen to what happened. You're going to laugh at this one.
They never get back to me. Even worse, they send Richie Torres, Bill Clinton, and Liz Cheney to Michigan. So again, and not only that, Bill Clinton is scolding Arab Americans.
Yeah.
Like, yo, they were there first. Pretty much they were there first. Y'all got to just deal with it or leave. Like, this is what their campaign decided to do. Let's not send Jamal Bowman there, who, again, I have, thank God, alhamdulillah, right? Like so much support in Michigan where like my opponent attacked me for it. Like he literally was like, you don't represent your district. You represent California and Dearborn, Michigan. My opponent said this shit in a debate.
Wow.
Okay. So that is how, and he said that because he knows that's an Arab American community.
Yeah, Dan.
So
That's like a ranch
I want to go there.
Yeah.
Right? Y'all ignore me, which tells me who you have around you in your campaign, but you send Bill Clinton and Richie Torres. So
listen to that, ladies and gentlemen. So this is really interesting. Out of all the people to send, they sent Richie Torres, who is very, very much anti-Palestinian, a pro-Israel whack job. Like that guy's crazy. He loves Israel more than he loves the Bronx. He talks about Israel more than he talks about his own constituents in the Bronx. And the Bronx is what? The poorest district in New York City. So he talks more about Israel than he does the Bronx. So I have a number of people in the show that live in the Bronx that are not happy with Richie Torres. That's who they chose to send there. So like I said, it's almost like they weren't trying to win. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder if it was just about raising money, if it's just about fundraising, and that's all they care about. Makes you wonder. Now, there was one more piece to this. I want to make sure I did not miss this part.
To right after October 7th, condemn, denounce.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sometimes YouTube does this. Where are we? 2636. Let me do that. Okay. So we were 26.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to the October 7th issue because you mentioned to right after October 7th, condemn, denounce, basically say Israel can do whatever it wants. Tell me what was happening in Congress at that time. What kind of pressure were you getting from the AIPACs and everybody else?
It's funny. After October 7th, I actually started feeling less pressure because it was just like, it is what it is, right? Like, so October 7th happens and listen, of course, we condemn the killing of any innocent people. Like that's just in any context, right? October 7th happens. I swear it was the next day, probably October 8th. There's a resolution on all of our desks condemning October 7th and just saying a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm like, okay, AIPAC had to write this resolution. Because one of the first lines was like, Hamas's unprovoked attacks. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like, see, so we're just going to start lying? Like, what do you mean unprovoked? They're living in apartheid. Like, there's settlement violence that year. The settlement violence was at record numbers. And there's 75 years of Nakba. Why are we saying unprovoked? I can't. And I'm like, I can't sign. I cannot support this resolution. Not only that, everyone, like president, mayors, governors, senators, everybody immediately, we stand with Israel, we stand with the Jews, right? Was the rhetoric. The other rhetoric was from Netanyahu and others, we're going to respond. They are human animals. We're cutting off food and water and electricity. And we're going to attack tomorrow. And they've been attacking ever since. So I'm like, we're going, so again, it was clear for me, like these people are going to commit. And what was the phrase? They said, remember what Amalek did to you. So he referenced the genocide before they attacked.
Yep.
So I'm like, so there was no pressure. It was super clear. Like we cannot support this and we need something else. And thank God, Rashida and Corey, a couple, maybe 10 days or so later, introduced the ceasefire resolution. I'm like, yes, we could sign on to this. And let's go from there. And then the way things manifested locally in connection with this gave more clarity. So, there was and forgive me for giving this long answer, but I want to give you these other points. So there was a Westchester for Israel rally days after the October 7th attacks. I did not want to go because I was not going to go to anything that was like for Israel, right? I wasn't going to go to that because, again, I felt that we were, of course, the community was grieving, and I'm not discounting that, but we as leaders were being dishonest. We weren't having a full conversation. And so I wasn't going to go. My chief of staff, who I love, who has to make sure I'm doing the things right politically, she's like, please go, Jamal, please go. Like, you please go to support so they can't say you didn't go. So I'm like, we had a fight, and we never fight because I always listen to her. But I'm like, I don't want to go, but you want me to go, I'm going to go. So we reached out to them and told them I was coming. They told me, don't come.
Wow.
There's too much anger in the community. Do not come. So I'm like, what, did I commit the attacks, right? But this is captures how they treated me from the beginning. And then try to flip it as if I'm some anti-Semite or something.
So this is important, guys. And the thing that I was going to say is that, remember, Jamal Bowman's district also changed. I'm not sure if everybody remembers that, but when his district was redrawn, like New York City districts for voting purposes are crazy. Like they redrew his district. And apparently when that happened, his constituents changed a little bit, right? And so the reason why I wanted you to hear this is because I think it's important to know what's happening behind the scenes. This does not excuse Jamal Bowman, though. Like, bruh, you could have had this conversation on Left Independent Media when that was happening. You could have had this conversation on Left Independent Media when all of these things that you're talking about were going down at that time. The fact that it's like now you want to come forward, like, and maybe it's a fear thing of, I don't want to go tell people how I really feel because then they're going to try to get me out of my seat and I'm going to lose my seat, but you lost your seat anyway. So this is why I always tell people, please just be true to yourself, regardless. And yeah, it may mean you may lose some damn things. Okay. It may mean you may not get that promotion that you want or whatever, but you'll be able to sleep better at night because you were true to yourself. I think that's very important. So it's a good interview to watch. Make sure you watch the whole thing. Cause like I said, he goes through what happened while he was in Congress during that time. So especially interesting story, but at the same time, another good thing about that conversation is that it seems like, and I saw the full one on Patreon, so just keep that in mind. It almost seems like he's trying to build something else outside of the two-party system, because again, he said he doesn't think the Democratic Party can be reformed. Having been there, he doesn't think so. And he was a part of the squad too. So what does that tell you about AOC and Ilhan and all of them? They know it can't be reformed either. But it sounded like he was trying to start something else on the outside, like apart from all of that. It's interesting. I don't know. Like, I didn't have this show when Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush and all of them won. Like, I started the show in 2021. I think it was right after Force the Vote. So I wasn't a part of the left media that did interview squad members. But I will say, I think it was a terrible mistake for them to choose to distance themselves from left independent media or any independent media, to be honest. I think that was a mistake, because had he kept that type of relationship, that's the thing. Like, the media, the community would have gone to bat for you, knowing we would have known what was happening, and they would have gone to bat for you. But because you decided to distance yourself. Also, I know Roger's in the chat. I remember Roger had approached Jamal Bowman a couple of times, and Roger, was asking him about, what about this? What is your plan to do that? And Jamal Bowman was kind of nasty. See, Jamal Bowman's really chill and stuff in that interview with Ronnie, and now because he's not in Congress. But during that time, when activists were approaching Jamal Bowman was not nice. These are just things I remember. So sorry. This is weird, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm not telling you to feel sorry for Jamal Bowman, but I do think it was interesting to hear what was happening behind the scenes. Wouldn't have been behind the scenes if he would have kept that community with the left independent media. So, but kudos to Ronnie for asking those questions, because I ask him about the Iron Dome. All right, let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Uncle Dut. Just showing you some love from NOLA, New Orleans. Hey, NOLA. SCLA, right when you said it's a long story, I was reading it behind you. Oh yeah, it's a long story. Thank you, Alexander. Things in the Mideast are bad enough under Biden. Biden didn't bother to reintroduce the Iran nuclear deal when he came to power, so he's just as bad. I forgot about that. I forgot about the Iran nuclear deal. Thank you, Lawn Guy. Stewart gave Ukraine Nazi soldier an award who has a tattoo that is a sun made of swastikas called a Sonnenrad. Everyone should Google it. Oh, I remember that, John Stewart. That's right. I don't think he realized that at the time, but yeah, that was bad. And thank you for this one as well. DSA is a Hitler-right group. There, I said it. Weird and interesting. I don't know about that. And thank you for this one. DSA supported Ukraine Nazis and G-side in Gaza /Nazis. Yeah, buddy. DSA, I'm not a member of DSA, but I know some people are. I think there are better ways you can use your money. Saying. And thank you for this one. DSA should have zero credibility at this point. Call Me Trey said that might be exactly why people always sound like hypocrites, because they don't want to admit ignorance. Thank you, N. Willis. Now they could throw a bill into Chat GPT or some other AI and ask for the key components they are voting for. Interesting. Thank you, John. Let's be real. Democrats are doomed for life unless they get a likable, charismatic candidate. Thank you for saying the word likable, John. Because it's not just about charisma. People have to actually like you. I mean, didn't American Idol teach us anything? People got to like you. Thank you. Where's the love? Bowman confirmed what I suspected. I knew Democrats weren't trying to win. The question is, why did Democrats, they want to lose? Why did Democrats want to lose? I don't know. I just think they want to fundraise. Thank you, Lilu. This is not on any of your topics, but look into the DOJ investigating the jail facilities in Atlanta, and the district attorney that is over them is the same DA going after Trump. Interesting. I have to check that out. Thank you, Joe Photo. Sabrina, you have more in common with MAGA than you think. You have a better chance of achieving the Bernie platform with us than with the DNC. Let's drive the conversation. I don't think MAGA is open to universal health care, like giving everybody health care, a living wage. free public universities. I don't think they're open to that. Like, and I've had people on the show that were supporting Trump, and they didn't seem open to those. I need to have another panel, but they didn't seem open to those types of ideas. But thank you for that. Skylar, yeah, you may be onto something, Sabby. Maybe these consultants just wanted the Democrats' money while still getting Trump's obscenely pro-business policies. And Harris was the puts in the middle. Yeah, man. I mean, either way, they still get to raise money. Roger says Sabs SBX New York CD 15 Torres District is not just the poorest district in New York City, but in the U.S. And you hardly ever hear him talk about it. Thank you, Sparky. Keep in mind, Israel has killed many more Americans than Iran. Remember the USS Liberty. Thanks, Lawn Guy. Bowman also supported Ukraine Nazis. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Thank you, New York Varsity. I'm sad because if they stuck together, they could have survived as a unit. It's true. Thank you, Sparky. MEK Stooge. Rudy Giuliani lied about Reagan, saying we should always have Israel's back. In fact, Reagan figuratively told Israel to go F itself in a major way at least twice during his presidency. Yes, he did. And thank you, Sparky. Love you, Sabby. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we've reached our last story. I think this is pretty interesting. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're getting to the Anna Kasparian TYT story. Really interesting, folks, what people are admitting now. And you know, Ezra Klein, who is one of the ones, he went on to Pod Save America, and he had some things to say to the Democratic Party about where they went wrong and to shut up, basically. He said, shut up. I was like, okay. So TYT, they're discussing this. And of course, Anna is very excited to hear this from Ezra, because she is using this as her way of saying, I told you I've been right all along. It's a long story, but maybe not really. Let's get into this. What does Anna have to say about the Democratic Party? Listen to this.
The thing that surprised me least about the election was the sharp red shift in these big cities. Because if you just talk to anybody who lives in them, they are furious. And this idea that like, oh no, the economy is actually good or crime is actually down, or this is all just Fox News, like shut the up with that.
Congratulations, everyone. Libs have caught on to something that we figured out 2 years ago. Crime is a problem. And if you just tell people, voters specifically, that it's not a problem and it was way worse in the 90s, so you shouldn't be complaining, there will be backlash. There will be blood, okay? And so here we are. Ezra Klein was on Pod Save America to reflect on the disastrous election cycle that we just experienced for the Democratic Party. And he touched on how poorly blue cities have been run by progressive leaders. Got to keep it real. And so here's more of his argument. Here's more of his revelations, and then we'll break it down further.
The sense of disorder rising, right? Not just crime, but homeless encampments, trash on the streets, people jumping turnstiles in subways, crazy people on the streets. You just talk to people and they're mad about it. They feel it's different than it used to be. I mean, in San Francisco, like the fury is overwhelming. And you see that it's not just the presidential level. London Breed, the SF mayor, just lost re-election. In Oakland, they recalled the mayor. A bunch of the progressive DAs across the country were recalled or beaten in re-election campaigns. If Eric Adams has a lot of problems, but if he were obviously on the ballot, he would almost certainly, it seems to me, lose. You have to be able to govern well. People don't follow politics, but they live in the place they live.
Yeah, I follow politics, and I also live in the place I live. And I've been furious for several years now. And everyone immediately, oh, Anna's just a secret right-winger. Anna's just a secret right-winger. No. I'm not a secret right-winger. I see the dysfunction, and I see working class Americans getting their catalytic converters stolen, okay, getting their homes broken into, getting assaulted on the subway or the train. And I'm supposed to just shut my mouth about it and tell everybody everything's fine because it's not the 90s? No.
Pause. Okay, so let's jump into this part of the conversation here. One of the things that I do want to point out about the crime issue, I think the difference is there's a difference between the data that says that discusses violent crime. If you look at the data that discusses violent crime, it shows that violent crime has gone down. But I think what Ezra and Anna are discussing is crime overall. So when you change that from violent crime to crime overall, obviously the numbers go in a different direction. Two, another thing I want to bring up, Anna has no room to talk about anybody calling her right wing when she did the same thing to people like me. She did this to like Jimmy Dore. She did this to a number of us that were not happy with the Democratic Party. And you guys know I supported Jill Stein. I voted for Jill Stein. So I voted third party. I hate the two-party system, right? So she was calling us right wing online, on Twitter, on TYT. Anybody who was not willing to go along with the progressives who had sold out or go along with the Democratic Party in the end, Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur sat right there on TYT and smeared us as right wing. So now that is happening to her, now it's just like, oh, whoa, just because I feel this way about one issue doesn't mean that I'm right wing. But Anna said this about other people. She said this about other people, that they were right wing for having those same feelings. 3, Anna and Cenk live in Los Angeles. And yes, obviously crime is an issue in Los Angeles, also San Francisco. But what I think people who live in California got to understand, the rest of the country is not California. Anna has to realize the rest of the country is not Los Angeles. The rest of the country is not San Francisco. So yes, you may have really high crime where you are in Los Angeles, but that doesn't mean it's the same across the country. They're right about the tent communities, which I've been warning you about for years. For years, I told you the tent communities were increasing, but that goes back to a poverty issue. So to me, if you come into me and you just saying that there's more crime, but you're not linking the crime back to poverty, then I'm asking, what is the agenda? Like, what are you really trying to accomplish? Anybody can look outside and say, hey, oh, look, there's more people out there on the street sleeping. Oh, God, no, the crime has gone up. Link the two together. Most crime is poverty driven. Not all of it, but most. So this is the other piece. Why aren't you connecting a lot of the crime to poverty? That was a bad place to pause that. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not going to wait until after the election to talk about how it's a problem. I'm going to talk about it well before the election. So, maybe Democrats, maybe progressives can recalibrate. But that's the thing about the left. They don't believe in recalibrating, okay? They think they know it all. They think they're the best. They think that anyone who crosses them or tweaks them or critiques them is the bad guy.
You thought that too. Like, I'm so confused. All of a sudden, Anna has this epiphany as if she never did these same things to other people. Anna Kasparian, honey, you said the same thing. You said the same thing, that no one could tell you anything, that you knew everything. This is just crazy to me.
And congratulations, in the state of California, Donald Trump flipped 10 blue counties into red counties. Let's take a look at the map. This is the electoral map. First one on the left-hand side, of course, is from 2020. And then, would you look at that? One of the most liberal parts of the country has become increasingly red. I wonder why that happened.
California is also expensive as hell. It's ranked number 1 when we talked about the housing costs in this country. Remember, we were talking about that cost of living report that I cover each year. California's number 1. You need to make I think it's $42 and some change an hour to have a 2-bedroom rental in California, a modest 2-bedroom rental in California. Okay, so, but again, as I said this before, California is not the rest of the country. And that's the West Coast thing. On the East Coast, I hear a number of people will say, well, in New York is like this, New York is like that. When I lived in New York, everything was New York. New York is this, New York is that. But I say the same thing to New Yorkers. You have to realize that everybody else on the East Coast is not New York City. Every other city on the East Coast is not New York. So just because it's happening in New York doesn't mean it's happening all up and down the East Coast. Just because it's happening in California, Anna, doesn't mean it's happening all along the West Coast. Now, California is a big state and it takes up a good portion of the coast. But I want people to understand that, two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that when we look at overall crime, that has increased. When we look at violent crime, that has decreased. But it can also be true that Anna and Ezra, they are looking at the crime in the areas that they live in, and they are applying it to the rest of the country, where there are places in the country where they're not seeing these spikes in crime. So we have to think about that. Two things can be true at the same time.
Okay, in New York, last time Biden won, but Trump lost by 24. This time he only lost by 12. Remember, he was talking about how he's going to win New York, and of course he wasn't going to win New York, and that was outrageous. But what he was getting at is, I'm going to do a lot better than you expect, and he did. Except there was one show that expected it, and it was us. And so, look, I think that our advantage is that we're not bullied by the media gaslighting industrial complex. And so there's two different factors here. So there's the extreme left, identitarian left, whatever we're calling them these days, right? So those guys say, no, crime is imaginary, it doesn't affect anyone, it's blah, 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 right? And I'm like, look, guys, first of all, look at the stats. The stats are clear. In fact, I was on Hassan's show, my nephew, and he pulled up the stats as we were doing the debate on it, and the stats showed that I was right. So there's no question about it. And then you go talk to real people. Can you guys please, everybody overused the term touch grass, but go talk to non-political people. So I go to a picnic or a barbecue or whatever it is, and as soon as I got non-political people, I immediately ask them what they're thinking. And in California and New York and San Francisco and Philly and Washington, the first thing that would come out of their mouth is, I hate the crime. The crime's out of control, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, etc. And then I ask them, what do you think about Biden? This is now 2 years ago, a year ago, etc. And they're like, obviously too old, what are they doing? It's crazy, right? So, but when we would tell both the identitarian left and the corporate Democrats, you guys are crazy. Biden's way too old and crime is real and people are really pissed about it. They're like, no, that doesn't suit our purposes.
Let me pause. I don't remember anyone saying that crime is imaginary. I don't remember anyone saying that, regardless of political ideology. If you have, let me know. 2, crime has always been higher in the bigger cities. DC, Philly, LA, New York. That's always been the case as long as I can remember. But 2, again, if you're just talking about crime and you're not discussing the cause, that gives me a side eye. I give you a side eye, because the reality is, why is it increased so much? Remember, we had the pandemic, 2 years ago now? 2 years ago. No, 2020, height of the pandemic, right? So there are a lot of businesses closed. A lot of people lost their jobs. If you lived in a state that was locked down, like my state of Massachusetts, a lot of people lost their jobs. That leads to poverty. Poverty can lead to crime. And I'm not making excuses for the crime, but what I'm saying is, make the connection. What happened over the past 4 years? Going back to 2020, the pandemic. So you are going to, when you see increase in poverty, you see increase in crime. So we got to make that connection.
That's not in our ideology. We reject it out of hand. Well, if you keep rejecting facts, well, this is where you're going to wind up.
100%.
So, all right, I'll get to Ezra Klein in a second.
So I want to go to a segment featuring Harry Enton, because they did their post-election analysis and they noticed a trend when it came to the blue parts, like the bluest parts of the country, and what they have noticed following the 2024 presidential election. So let's take a look at that.
Donald Trump put up the best Republican performance for a Republican nominee for president in at least 20 years, if not the entire 21st century. We're talking about Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco.
Before we get to the crime issue, there's something else all those cities have in common, which Anna and Jink don't want to mention. Chicago, LA, New York City, and San Francisco also were sanctuary cities. Keep that in mind. I think that's important to add to that conversation. Let's continue.
Across the map, Donald Trump put up historically strong numbers for Republican candidate, for president, in places that, truthfully, if you had asked me 8 years ago, I would have never thought possible.
No, I mean, it is really stunning. So what exactly is driving it?
What's driving it? You know, I think immigration, one of the things you mentioned earlier on in that last segment, is part of it, but I think crime is a big part of it as well.
Yep.
If you look at Gallup polling, you ask Democrats nationwide, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with our efforts to control and bring down the crime rate? What you see is the dissatisfaction number now versus a decade ago. Look at that. The unsatisfied number from 35% to 58%. The satisfied number dropped by 20 points.
That's okay.
But those cities, again, I talked about this a year ago. In those cities, residents were complaining about immigration. They were complaining about the migrant crisis. They were complaining about the crime. I saw in local New York news show. Someone sent this to me. Apparently in Queens and some part in Queens, I think it's Roosevelt Avenue. This is on a local news that a brothel has been set up in broad daylight. Like they literally had women, I assume they're Venezuelan women, who were just like, quickie, like broad daylight. They showed there's children walking to school in Queens off of Roosevelt Avenue. I'm not kidding. But when I told people about these things, I brought people on the show to talk about what was happening in New York, what was happening in right over here in Boston when they kicked people out of the rec center. And they said, no, we're going to put the migrants here. There was just a representative from Massachusetts who was on the news that said, I encourage Massachusetts residents to open their arms and their doors to migrants who have come in. What? So this is what I was trying to tell you guys. Make the connection. Now, does that mean that everyone who came here is doing that? No, it doesn't. But all those cities have the increase in crime that he showed you. And all those cities also were sanctuary cities, and they had an increase in migrant population as well. So you got to put two and two together. People didn't like it when I said it, but I was trying to tell you what the people, black people in black neighborhoods were complaining. They said why are they getting free housing? Why are you giving them a debit card? Why are you just like this? Eric Adams, I would argue, probably wouldn't have been under investigation if he would have kept his head down and not spoken out publicly about the migrant issue in New York City and criticized the Biden administration. Next thing you know, he's under investigation. So we got to put two and two together. Even Eric Adams, who was the mayor of New York City, even he was complaining. He said, we don't have the resources. We can't keep this up. So put both of those together.
Hey, just go to them and tell them everything's fine. Crime isn't as bad as it was in the 90s. That's not politics, okay? That's not trying to win. That's digging your heels in and insisting that you're right, even as there's widespread concern over these issues. Look, the main role of government is to protect its citizens. And in these situations, in these blue cities, when the public doesn't feel that Democratic leadership is doing enough to protect working class people, okay, they're not going to favor the Democrats. And as they're being gaslit, they're just going to increasingly get angry. How do I know that? Because I've experienced it firsthand myself.
Okay, so here's something else I want to say to add to this, because the reality is this. People are going to ask this question. Okay, so at the end of the day, who are we better off with? Are we better off with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Anna's going to give a response to that. But I would say, even when you look at the votes, and I looked at the data, the fact that Donald Trump increased votes in New York City, we're talking about, again, these are districts that were blue. Some of these people voted for Donald Trump because of immigration issue, because of immigration. Just solely because of immigration. Now, a lot of people are going to assume, oh, it was white people who did that. Really? All of them? Are you sure? Because there's been a number of Latino Americans that I have heard from that also wanted to support Donald Trump because of the immigration issue. There were Black voters that supported Donald Trump because of the immigration issue. And when you brought this up, people are just like, how dare you talk about that? You're right wing. And I'm like, no, I'm just saying, like, these are legitimate concerns of people in the community, and they have a right to voice that concern, which they tried to do with their local officials, and the local officials kind of just wanted to brush it off. Now you see the results of that after the presidential election. So the question that people are asking, whether it's crime, whether it's immigration, is who are you better off under? Listen to what Anna says. This is interesting.
Can you please adjust? Both the establishment Democrats and the identitarian left would come and yell at us as if we were the enemy and we were trying to help Trump win and we were hurting the Democratic Party, when we were honestly almost the only ones who were trying to help so that we could beat Trump.
Yeah, well, I'm done with that. And so I'm not for either party, and I'm gonna do my job and my analysis, and I wanna make it very clear to people watching.
You were for Kamala Harris, son. I'm not for either party. You were for Kamala Harris, and you were shitting on those of us that wanted to support third party.
Watching the show, do not expect me to be an activist for any side, because at this point, that's a losing strategy, especially with the Democrats who just refuse to take any advice, refuse to address, refuse to recalibrate. And honestly, when I look at which party has made my life worse, and it's because local politics has more of an impact on your day-to-day life, it's the Democrats. And they need to accept that and change. And if they don't, well, they're gonna keep losing support, even in cities like Los Angeles and even in states like California.
So Anna Kasparian says that the Democrats have made her life worse. I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but I think we're looking at this the wrong way. And I think we're looking at it, though, like, I think she's given the wrong response. It's not about whether it was the Republicans that made your life worse or the Democrats that made your life worse, because both of those parties are corporate. Both of those parties are owned by the billionaire class. So who's really making your life worse are billionaires. That's who's making everyone's life worse except for their own. And of course, their family members as well. If you look at this from an MCDS perspective, one of the things Eric points out, he said, an MCDS analysis of TYT tantrums. First, the MC. They're acting like Democrats are actually trying to win when it's really just theater to distract the peasants. Meanwhile, the billionaires rob us blind with impunity. Eric goes on to say, asking why are Democrats so bad is the wrong question. The right question is, why is the Uniparty so bad? And the answer is, as with all political why questions, is the same: big money and corruption. So that's the M and the C, money and corruption. Let me go back here. Eric goes on to say here, you can talk about the demands as well. 7 more demands and solutions at 11 demands: money, corruption, demands, and solutions. And then this part here. And now the demands, the DS part, demand solutions. We need better Democrats is the demand the corporate establishment wants us to make. Demands they don't want us to make is to fix big money in politics and government, end the wars, real health care for all, a minimum standard of living for everyone. So does everybody see this, the difference? Like, this is what, especially corporate media, they think they want you to believe that the solution is just to elect different Democrats. I'm speaking Democrats because, you know, this is where a lot of us came from, was the Democratic Party. But that's not the solution. The solution is to get big money out of politics and government. The different politicians, they're just puppets. They're puppets for the billionaires. They're puppets for Elon Musk. They're puppets for Larry Fink. They're puppets for Jeff Bezos. That's it. As I've shown you before, they are not at the top of the pyramid. The billionaires are at the top of the pyramid. Everyone's got to get this and fully get it. So when Anna Kasparian makes this argument that who made my life worse, the Democrat or the Republicans, even though she says she's not for either party at this point, what Anna Kasparian is doing is that she's still keeping you in the duopoly, because she's still telling you that one is better than the other. So she's still keeping you in the two-party system. And as long as both of those parties are controlled by the billionaire class, neither one of them is really better for you. That's what I want people to really understand. Get big money out of electoral politics. Then you can talk about whether or not one of these parties is better for the people. If you really want to see how these parties are going to fight for the people, you got to get big money out of electoral politics. And you'll see how much they claim to care about you and see how that works out. What a mess, folks. What a mess. Let's go to Sebastian said, who paid Anna. Yeah, it's just when you say I'm not for either one of these parties, but then you say, but this is the one that you may not be for either one of those parties, but you're still keeping the viewers there. So it's just, come on. We know what TYT is doing. Come on, right? I told you what I thought they were going to do before. One more thing I want to add to this clip, because I don't want to forget to add this. TYT is doing what I predicted they would do a couple of months ago. I think that TYT is trying to go in the same direction as Breaking Points, where they're going to have one person on the show that has more of a left perspective and another person on the show that has more of a, she ain't got there yet, but more of a right-leaning perspective. Now she says, she's not right-wing, she's, independent, but I think they're doing this also for views, because the reality is, I showed you the numbers. Breaking Points has less subscribers than TYT does, but Breaking Points gets more views. So I think TYT, this is their way of kind of shaking things up and still have the two main hosts, but have them have different perspectives. And that way they can gain a bigger and a more diverse audience. That's what I think is happening there. I don't know. I just try to think outside the box sometimes, and I just don't think that everyone is acting in good faith. Sometimes I feel like there might be some type of a strategy to this. Let's go to the comments in the chat. Okay, thank you, Joanna. Did he explain pulling the fire alarm? I did not hear that part. She's talking about Jamal Bowman. Thank you, John. I know this has nothing to do with politics, but just curious. Are you into Gothic novels and movies such as Dracula, Phantom of the Opera, and most Tim Burton movies? Yes. So I've seen a lot of Tim Burton movies and I do like them. I saw Phantom of the Opera when I was in middle school. We went to go see the musical. I love Phantom of the Opera as well. And also Dracula. It's funny, I don't even call them Gothic novels. These are just things I grew up on. Skylar says, it wasn't a freaking red shift. It was Dem voters not bothering to show up at the polls because the Dems are trash. Thank you, Joe. Biden just approved long-range missiles in Ukraine. Is he trying to start World War III for Trump? I believe he is. Joe Biden is crazy. Thank you, Brian. High crime here in Stockton, California. The Oracle says crime in your urban centers is different from crime in the rural areas. I agree. Thanks, Joe. The reason I won't consider voting for the left is because I will never forgive them for their arrogance and totalitarian approach to the pandemic. Yeah, I know. I've heard that from a lot of people. Thank you for this one as well. The crime in California came from decriminalizing crime. George Soros, DAs. And thank you for this one. Establishment Republicans won't support Medicare for all, and I prefer no government in healthcare, but Trump is a populist and he will at least hear you out. The DNC won't. And thank you for this one. Big blue cities decriminalizing crime, including the border, and stealing from CVS is the Dems Soros making our lives worse. And why do people steal from CVS? I don't know about you guys, but the CVS near me is kind of empty. Like there's not much in there. Like I don't know, it's small. I don't have a large CVS near me. Maybe you guys do. And thank you, La Senora. Is YouTube getting rid of sub and view count? I haven't heard anything about that. That would be funny if it did. That would be interesting if YouTube got rid of that. I mean, I wouldn't care either way, but that would almost mean that then they would be doing away with the algorithm. Interesting. Maybe you know something I know. Amanda said Anna's a hypocrite. I stopped watching TYT when I learned about Sabby, Gray Zone, Katie Halper, Bree, Rania, etc. I'm over the gaslighting. I think it's a strategy. Thank you, Kiweki. Internal Democrat projections indicated Biden was due to lose big time. Maybe they didn't want to lose. They just realized they couldn't win. So they just decided to raise as much money as they could anyway. And that's possible. Hey, I don't put anything past it. Thank you, Anita. Been a great show, Sabby. Today is my birthday today and will not divulge my age. LOL, your fellow Gamecocks in the house. All right. So Anita, University of South Carolina grad, if you're a Gamecock, happy birthday to you, or early happy birthday to you, Anita. Everyone wish Anita an early happy birthday. It is what it is. That is it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a great Sunday evening. I'll be back live Tuesday night. Don't miss that, with a very special guest. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.